All right, I'll call the June 5th DRB meeting to order. First is agenda changes.
Mitch, speak up. I have trouble hearing you from...
Actually, let me get to the microphone. That's... Okay, first off, actually a little further from the microphone. I'll introduce to you Kate Kelly. She's our new minute taker.
Hey, Kate.
A few things. One, which I'd like to discuss for now. July 3rd is 2 meetings from now is July 3rd, and basically I'd like to know for our scheduling. Would you like to keep that particular date? Would you like to perhaps move it forward a week? Would you like to have it canceled, or would you like to just simply keep that date?
If we can cancel it, fine, but my guess is there's business, but it should be conducted on Tuesday, July 3rd.
All right.
That's my opinion.
Would you?
I'm amenable to moving it around. I'm around that week.
All right. Would you like to do it possibly July 10th, or?
Yeah, a week later works for me.
We can also plan on that, and then depending on whether we have applications, schedule accordingly. Because right now, Mitch, we don't have anything for that meeting, right?
We do have one thing.
We have one application?
Yeah, it's a warned application.
Okay.
Well, and this could be,
There's 5 Tuesdays in July, we could just shift them, right?
There's 5 Tuesdays in July?
I think so.
July 3rd, 10th, 17th.
3rd, 10th, 17th, 24th, and 31st. So we have an
Interesting.
extra.
That'd be kind of interesting.
Well, it doesn't matter, and even if we do shift them and utilize the 31st, then you're going to have a meeting the
That's
following week in August anyway, so they'll get scrunched up one way or the other. But if you're all amenable to just pushing it to the 10th,
Well, if we did the 10th
do
and
that.
the 24th,
That might actually, yeah.
but it would be the 2nd and 4th instead of, that's being used, never mind.
If this is going to get continued, we would request that we keep the 3rd available due to holiday schedule. We're going to lose some slippage there.
Well, there is also the next meeting, which is June 19th.
Yeah, we've got holiday schedules, we've got a couple weeks blocked out. If we don't hit, I think the 19th, we will not be available to have our traffic studies fully revised and submitted. So we were aiming for the 3rd, and if we get bumped from that, we're out 2 weeks. So.
If I may, part of it is my vacation schedule. I have long planned with all my family those 2 weeks, the following 2 weeks in July. So the 10th and 17th, I'm out of state and not available. We're doing a family vacation with my kids and grandkids. So the 3rd works. The 19th of June is, I think, too soon for us to, because we're trying to work out all the traffic issues. And so I would prefer either the 3rd, stay on the 3rd, or something that week.
well, the 3rd is oddly extreme from my point of view, but I'm here and I can do it if the rest of the board wants to do it.
I'm away that week.
so who is, besides Ted, who is not here or doesn't feel like they'll be able to make a meeting on the evening of July 3rd? Is it just Ted?
And John is not here, so he may or not be
Right.
available.
So you don't want to have a meeting on the 3rd?
Well, but we're willing to if necessary.
Yeah. So I like Sarah's idea.
Well, we can also, Sarah's point about there being 5 Tuesdays, we could shift and pick up a meeting on the 31st of July.
Actually, I don't think you would even have to. It would just be shifting it to the 10th and the 14th, and the 7th,
But
and the
The
24th.
10th and the 24th.
Yeah.
The applicant can't make the 10th.
They can make the 24th, though.
We would be taking up different applications then on the 10th, not not
So then the same
Hannaford.
would be true of the 3rd. It wouldn't be a Hannaford
Right.
application on the 3rd, right?
So we have another application that's ready to go for the first meeting in July, whatever that meeting is.
Okay.
It sounds like Hannaford would love to be here on July 3rd to present.
But they also mentioned that they wouldn't have all of their information, and at this point, it might be...
You wouldn't have it by June 19th.
Right.
They're saying they'll have all the information for July 3rd. So we can either hold the meeting on the 3rd with Ted not here, or I think you're right, Sarah's suggestion would be the next best is bump the July meetings to the 10th and the 24th, if Hannaford is continued, which it sounds like the applicant is asking for, you take them up on the July 24th.
I will not be here on the 24th.
I won't either, but.
Okay.
Then that's it, that's out.
Then perhaps we ought to just stick with the normal schedule if you're all okay with being here on July 3rd.
Yeah, let's just do it.
All right, so
Okay.
July 3rd and then July 17th would be our typical schedule. And David, we'll work around as far as what days are best for you to continue on that. And maybe at the end of this meeting, that could be a discussion as far as whether it's best to have you continued, say, to the 19th, or to have you continue just to, right. All right.
Our experts will need time to read whatever is submitted and then respond, which we need to factor into this as well.
Right.
Understood,
Mitch's
absolutely.
point is well taken. At the end of this meeting, we'll figure out whether it makes sense to reconvene on the 19th or the 3rd.
Or some other particular day if, we'll figure out, maybe to have something of a meeting on the 19th and so forth beyond that. But we can discuss that, see how far we get in this meeting. I'll just mention discussions I have a bunch of things to add for other business, possible change of start time, a very, very small site plan amendment, new regulations, and just wanted to also mention that at the end of this meeting, it may be good for the board to have a discussion regarding what they feel is needed for completeness of the hearing itself.
All right, thank you. All right, next to review the minutes of May 15th.
I have a few typos I can just turn in, but otherwise I didn't have any issue with them.
I have a couple comments that I made, some additions, I guess. On page 5, second paragraph, Dick J. asked if it was typical to remove intersection crashes from high crash data. What I hoped I said was asked if it was typical to remove intersection crashes due to inattention from high crash data. I wouldn't expect that you just take crashes out of the data.
Dick, what page is that?
That was 5.
Okay.
Second paragraph. And then on, I believe was the last page, under our, I think we're in deliberative session. Oh, no, because we don't take notes for that. We were commenting on stuff that we had been talking about for traffic-wise. I'm pretty sure I had made a comment during that section that there appears to be a discrepancy between the queuing predicted by the model and what was observed, and that I would like some further comment from the applicant, kind of going along with what some of the comments that John had made. So that was it for me.
So, Kate, do you understand what Dick's looking for on that last part?
The second part, could you just help me out on where you are in the minutes?
Okay, the second one was on page 9. And I'm basically just after the second paragraph, which was a lot of stuff that John S. was talking about. I think this comment, my comments were not included at all. So I just wanted to point out that I'd commented that I thought from what we observe and what the model said, that there seems to be a discrepancy, and I would like it if the applicant could expand on that.
And we also have a member of the public that has a question or comment on the minutes. If you can just state your name and...
My name's Carl Wolin, and I made comments at the last meeting, but I don't think I said what is said in the minutes, and if I did, I just need to retract it because it's not based on anything. But
What
it has
page
me.
are you on?
So, I don't know what page it is.
It's on page 7.
Page 7?
Carl offers his respect.
Yeah.
Da-da-da-da.
I don't believe I said anything about other Hannaford communities or any results that were not in line with testimony. I did mention the Williston project that started at Taft's Corners, but this makes me say that something that I didn't mean to say if I said it, but I don't believe I did say it. So if that could be stricken, I'd appreciate it.
So he went on to say that he feels that part there is not your words.
Basically, experts testified in other Hannaford
Yep.
communities and the results were not in line with testimony.
Yep.
I'd like that stricken.
Yep.
At the end of that sentence, Carl, and
That,
then-
everything I just read, it could, experts to testimony. And it could just say, not needed in this hearing because he noted that the experts who testified for development in Williston. I did mention the Williston beginning of Taft's Corners, but
Yep.
I wasn't making any allusion to Hannaford's or any prior projects or traffic results not coming in as projected. I don't know what those are, so I shouldn't have said that. I don't think I did.
but just for Kate's benefit, to make it simple, just the easiest thing is to strike from experts testified to the end of that sentence,
Yes.
and then retain the rest of the sentences in the paragraph, or not?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have that, Kate?
And I can give this to her. Okay. Thanks.
Kate's in the awkward position of not having taken those minutes, so.
And you guys can pause for just a minute, I'm really sorry, but I seem to be having a technical issue with my computer that's not allowing me to type at the moment. Sorry. Just say it.
Actually, I was having that same type of issue a few moments ago. It must be some type of... I think mine's okay for now.
Okay, I move to approve as amended.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ted motioned, Dick second.
Are we on hold?
Yeah, for a second, I think.
All set?
Go for it.
All right, up next, Martin Foods of South Burlington. Hearing continued from 4/17 and 5/15. I think the next thing we're going to talk about was adequacy of circulation, parking, and loading. I think we have a submittal from the applicant. Do you want to get up and speak to any of it, or? What we're going to do is go through each section, and you can speak to it, and then I'm going to have the board open it up to the board for questions, and then I'll open it up to the public.
Well, we can approach this any way you'd like to. What we did was to review staff comments relative to the application, specifically the ones, not the most recent, I think it was supplemental 2. We looked at, because we only got that a couple of days ago, but supplemental 1 that kind of went through the criteria and raised questions on certain things. So we provided a memorandum to you where we responded to the questions that were raised by staff in their staff memorandum. And I think it's fairly self-explanatory. I presume that you have reviewed it. It's been available on the website for the public to review as well. And so we're happy to respond to questions, but I have not come prepared with a presentation. I figured because you've received the material, I don't, at least in terms of an initial presentation, have more to add to that. But if you have specific questions, we're very happy to respond to those.
Okay.
So to clarify, Dennis, and for everyone else, it's the May 10th staff report. That's the date at the top that, that David's most recent memo responds to.
Okay.
So there's a May 10th staff report, and then there's the there's the May 29th memo from David White that walks through that staff report. There was also a new staff report that was ready for you for this meeting, but I think it probably makes sense to grill David on any questions you have on the May 10th staff report and his responses to it first.
Or any other questions, we're happy to respond.
Okay. No question?
No, this is familiar ground for many of us.
Yeah, just to refresh your memory, at the last meeting, the first meeting, we talked about stormwater, which is principally site plan standard, which one is it? Site plan standard 6. And at the last meeting, we talked about traffic, which is site plan standard number 1. So we had assumed that at this meeting, you would then proceed, taking it from the top, to site plan standard number 2, which is adequacy of circulation, parking, and loading, provisions for snow removal, emergency access, that sort of thing. Which I'm not sure there's a whole lot to talk about on that. We mentioned snow removal. The applicant conceded a point we raised. But then moving on from there, we get to adequacy of exterior building design, which is site plan standard 3, where I think there was a lot of testimony during the original review in 2011 and 12.
Yeah, I believe some renderings have been submitted. I saw those on the Dropbox.
Yes, new submittals, renderings from the previous review. But if you want to bring those up,
Yep.
unless you want to hit site plan standard 2
But I
first.
thought we got something that they didn't want to submit.
No, just the leaf off, just the
Oh.
leaf off ones.
Okay.
Right, they didn't want, they,
actually had
different building.
a different layout of the Hannafords,
Okay.
so that was taken out.
So if you'd like to go through those with us and describe what those show in your opinion as to compatibility with surroundings and surrounding buildings, we would be interested in hearing that.
Okay, happy to do that. Mitch, if you could go to the site plan, the landscape plan, that one, thank you. So just by way of general layout, what we have here, again, just to orient people, we have Commerce Street, Mechanicsville Road, here's the Middlebury Bank and post office over here, and the existing entry drive for the Middlebury Bank going into the parking, which is split really into two parking fields, one which you might think of as the northern one is the eastern one, and then this is the building footprint. Now, this is the landscaping plan, so it shows that we're proposing to add street trees along Commerce Street as well as infill the piece of sidewalk that's missing, continue street trees down the entry drive and then around the perimeter of the site, and that includes infilling some trees that are missing along the existing sidewalk that goes along the canal. And then it shows the other landscaping that is interior to the site, on the landscape islands, around the perimeter of the parking fields, interior to the parking, and then this area here on the south end of the building, including the pocket park. So this is the images that follow that we're going to show are a mix of taking an existing photographs of the existing conditions, most of which I personally took quite a number of years ago now, on the site, and then having a specialist who works on integrating proposed designs into the existing photographs. They've taken our architectural designs, our site designs that include where the parking will be, and the other elements such as the landscaping, and integrating those into a computer-generated image that shows what the site, to a high degree of accuracy, what it will look like once it's completed. So if you'll move on from there. So this is the building as currently proposed, and I will say this is the third design. We started with one. We got this is now going back quite a number of years, 2010. We started with a design. We got feedback that people weren't happy with it. We came back with a second design and got feedback that people weren't happy with it. And then we ended up hiring the local firm of Baston Rood, who developed this design for this project. So this is unique. There's not another Hannaford that looks like it around. And this involves, it's from the its finished floor to its top, it's about 27 feet. It's been designed with a 2-story elevation so that you've got windows along the front as well as windows up top. And those are real windows that actually have, although there's not a second floor in that area, they are windows that let light into the space along the top. And then there's a canopy that wraps around it. You'll see here, and that break it up. So this is the east facade that faces toward the eastern parking field toward the post office. This is the southern facade, so this is toward the canal and Mechanicsville Road, and it shows that we are also proposing photovoltaic cells along that southern facade, and the canopy that wraps around a portion of this. It doesn't wrap the entire side. So you can move on from there. So this is the west facade toward 116. You'll see in subsequent ones this isn't especially visible because of the landscaping involved, but this is the rear of the building in effect. And this is the northern facade, and you'll see the canopy that comes along here as well, and continuing to have the windows on the upper element. And here are the loading docks back at that northwest corner. So these are photographs into which the company Pepperchrome has integrated the images, the computer-generated architectural plans as well as site plans. So here we're looking obviously from Mechanicsville Road across the pedestrian bridge on the southern view of the building. Let's just move through these quickly here. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time. So this is as you approach the bridge, you're now looking right at where the pocket park would be. And most of, quite a number of these trees already exist, and then that includes those that we're proposing. We're looking here at the pocket park and the southern edge of the building. And now as you turn the corner, starting to look up the existing sidewalk, again, the pocket park on the left, and if you'll continue on. And this is now looking straight up that path, and it includes both, again, the existing trees, photos of the actual existing trees, although taken a few years ago now, they're even taller today, as well as showing some of those that we're proposing to infill. And here is a view from Mechanicsville Road, standing right by the guardrail, looking back at the front facade of the building and the parking field. It includes existing trees as well as infill trees. From the same, more or less the same spot, but you can see along the guardrail, the existing path, and the building. And this is getting closer to the post office. The earlier photograph was taken from that vicinity. This is now, as we get closer to the post office, still looking back toward the building from the edge of Mechanicsville Road. Similar view, but now turning a little bit to the right, looking more at the parking field, less directly at the building. And again, looking across toward the parking field, you see the corner of the building there. So that the People's Bank, the Middlebury Bank would be back in this vicinity. And there you can see the bank across the eastern edge of the parking field. You see the People's Bank and the hillsides beyond. Now this is taken from behind the post office. So this is not going to be a frequently viewed image. Not a lot of people are standing right there on the grass behind the post office, as I was when I took the photograph. But you're looking now The trees, this is an existing tree along the sidewalk, but looking through the proposed landscaping and parking field at the front facade of the building. So this is from Commerce Street, this is the Middlebury Bank, looking into the existing driveway, and then where it will extend, and we're seeing street trees along that are being added, as well as the trees around the perimeter of the parking lot. And there's the side of the building, and here are trees that are in and around the parking lot, and obviously the hillside beyond. If you were to walk in along the sidewalk, this is taken more or less from the point where you're crossing from the People's Bank, excuse me, I keep saying that, the Middlebury Bank, Bank of Middlebury property onto what would be the Hannaford property, looking at the pedestrian sidewalk toward the front of the building. This would be the northeast corner of the building. And then back into the parking lot proper to the front facade. So this is taken from Route 116. This shows obviously the Quonset hut. This is the back of what was at the time Estes, now Aubuchon. And we are proposing fairly extensive landscaping along that western side of the building. And the building is in there in this image. Can't see it very well, but it's going to be pretty heavily screened. And here you can see a little bit of the building up there behind the auto, I'm blanking on the name of it, but the auto dealer that's there.
Droves.
Thank you. But again, pretty extensive landscaping there from 116.
That's it. That's the last picture.
Okay, so those are the images.
Thank you.
So have you used this technology before on other projects? And if so, do you have some like before and after, some pictures of the rendered pictures and then pictures of the final?
This kind of technology is actually very common today. It was less common at the time that we did this. And I'm trying to think of whether I've got an example to show you at the moment. Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of one. But we have, I'm thinking of, we use similar technology for the University of Vermont Medical Center inpatient building that's under construction, but it's not finished today, so I can't show that. I'd have to think about that. I'm sure there are examples, but off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of one that I could.
Just to get an idea of how well it compares to the final design.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, thank you.
And of course, we're not seeing it without leaves on the trees, but, so it'll be obviously more visible in the winter. A lot of that was landscaping, that was.
That is the nature of being in a four-season area where, the leaves do come off the trees.
Right.
It's true.
Want to talk about,
Sorry, is there anything new about these renderings, or these were what was
No,
shown last
these
time?
are identical to what we showed
Okay,
back in the prior review. We haven't changed a single thing.
thank you.
we'll talk a little bit about official map.
Were we going to keep each of these points open to the public or consolidate?
It's up to Dennis.
I'm going to consolidate it.
I'm interested in, your proposal still is for Pocket Park and an option, a 5-year option for a farmer's market to meet the official map criteria?
Well, it involves, let me clarify that. Could you go back to the landscape plan, please? So would like to be clear that we continue to believe that the official map as written does not meet the requirements of the statute, and I understand others disagree with us, but we think pretty clearly it talks about the applicant being able to show that you are where that, in fact, I've got it with me. Let me just read it to you so you understand what our concern is here. You know, it says in statute, no zoning permit may be issued for any land development within the lines, and that's the key phrase, of any street, drainageway, park, school, or other public facility shown on the official map. And the official map doesn't show any lines. It doesn't show a specific use. It doesn't show the lines. It doesn't give the applicant any guidance whatsoever with respect to what portion of this site is intended to be used for what use. And so we think it fails to meet the bare minimum of what the statute calls for in terms of an official map. So I need to, I think, state that very clearly, that we think that this is, that the official map as written is not enforceable because it doesn't meet those minimum standards. And I'm quite sure that others have a difference of opinion.
Has that been litigated or not?
It has not. Because we chose in the last proceeding to say, regardless of whether it's enforceable, we will nonetheless make some offers to you. And we make the same offers today that we made before, and that, which are two. One is the official map calls for making accommodation for one of the several possible uses that it talks about as a farmer's market. And we did a couple of things. One is we entered into an agreement with the Giro family to add this 0.32 acre portion, which was not originally part of our plans, to the site so that we had a grassy area that could be used by vendors who choose to do a grassy area. And that adds cost for Hannaford that, you know, it has no need for that land on its own. That's the sole purpose for acquiring it was for the farmer's market. And we proposed an easement for not just that area, but also this northern parking lot, so that the, those vendors who prefer to simply back up their truck and set up and operate out of their trucks, and quite a few, I don't know about here in Hinesburg, but in other farmers market, I think about the Burlington Farmers Market, for instance, many vendors prefer to operate off of pavement, out of their trucks. They have you can choose as a vendor, where do you want to be, on the pavement or on the grass? We provided for both and said, you know, we will allow that. We also provided for them public having access to bathrooms inside Hannaford, the farmers market having access to a hose bib outside, electric outside, and a position where they could put up a shed if they have materials and so forth that they want to be able to store. So I think, whereas the official map statute doesn't call for an applicant actually doing anything other than leaving the physical space for it, we've gone a lot further in terms of what we proposed for the farmers market to be able to use that space. The second one, I want to be clear, is a proposal for an easement for about an acre of land, not just the pocket park. Currently, there's an easement, if I recall, and this, don't hold me quite to it, this is off the top of my head, but I think it's like 20 feet wide for the sidewalk. And we propose to expand that to allow about an acre of land. So it's not just the pocket park, but rather all along widening that easement so that it encompasses this entire stretch of land, the grassy area and so forth, with the landscaping along here. So it's the walk, a much broader easement through this area, and off the top of my head, I don't know how wide that is, plus most of this area here. And a total of about an acre of land. And so one of the things that was listed as a possible use for this site on the official map was for a park. It was unspecified what kind of park or anything else. We have offered a park. So the two different things we've offered.
So I'm just trying to make sure I understand in my mind what your position is now. Are you taking a position that you did not take a few years ago, namely that the official map requirement does not apply to this application?
No, I'd say that's the position we've taken all along, that it does not apply.
But
we
that
have
was not...
nonetheless voluntarily said we will make an offer that if you choose you can take advantage of it, and we are showing how we're accommodating two of
And
the things.
I know you offered to accommodate it last time, but I think I heard you say in response to a question from Ted about was this issue litigated before? And I'm trying to figure out how we're going to be framing this, teeing it up for a decision.
I understood Ted's question to be whether it was litigated through the court system. And the question of whether or not the official map itself was applicable was not litigated.
In the environmental court.
At the environmental court, it was not one of the issues that was litigated.
But you contested that issue before the board last time.
That's
and-
correct. And the board, we stated then, and I'm stating now for the record, that we believe it's not enforceable. You can choose whatever you want to do. We don't think it's enforceable. I want you to know that. Nonetheless, we are this is the identical position we took before, which is that we don't believe that it's enforceable. Nonetheless, we are proposing to accommodate two
and
things.
just to maybe put a seal on this, Alex, I assume 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, we got an opinion from counsel representing the town that the official map requirement did apply to this application, and we proceeded accordingly. And I don't see any particular reason why we would change absent any change in the law or any different submission from the applicant.
I would agree. I think both David and you are correct, that their proposal hasn't changed, and the opinion that we received from the town attorney, which was actually sort of two opinions. It was our town attorney, Bud Allen, at the time, and then second opinion by the firm of Stitzel, Page, and Fletcher, that the official map was in fact enforceable and was, should apply to this application. So I don't think that's changed. I don't think if you ask for another opinion that you'd get a different one. I think there's a difference of opinion between Hannaford's team and the town's team, and that's just where we stand.
So I, for one, can just rely on the submissions by both sides in the past.
What I would like to clarify, though, is that David is making the point that it's the same proposal as last time. However, as we discussed at the last meeting, or as some opponents brought up, we don't have all of the same submittals for this application that we had for the last one. And when I reread your decision, or the previous board's decision, this was quite a bone of contention, and I think the hearing actually was closed and then had to be reopened so that additional testimony could be taken with regard to the farmer's market easement and the details of that easement and what would be allowed and what wouldn't be allowed. And if you read that original 2012 decision, you'll see that enumerated in there. So without getting that easement submitted again, which you haven't submitted for this current application, is it your client's desire to have us, go back into the record and recapture that same information and easement language and the like, or are you planning to resubmit that?
Our read of the latest staff report is that one of the things you expect will happen this evening is that you will discuss whether or not you have all the information you would like in order to make a decision. So I think we're looking for guidance from you as to what other kinds of information be required. So if the DRB feels that they want us to provide the draft easements we provided previously, or the plans that show the physical areas I just tried to describe verbally, let us know. And
Okay.
we can provide those materials. Right now, it feels like a little bit of a shot in the dark for us. We don't know what you want, what you don't want. I don't want to spend a lot of time on details that people aren't interested in. So if you're interested in the details, let us know, and we will take a look and consider providing those to you.
So just so the board knows, because you may not all have looked through the old materials the way I did recently, some of the visuals that David presented tonight in the last review were buoyed again by visuals of potential farmers market layouts, including the parking lot, so you could get an idea of how it could potentially look. I think they made pains in the last review to say, we're not designing this thing for you, we're just trying to show you how we're accommodating the official map. So that's, those are a piece of evidence that you might want to see, and then that together with the actual specifics of the easement that would be granted to the town, and the details that were discussed at that September or October meeting prior to the last decision, or
Well,
some things
actually-
you might consider.
Actually, I would consider the testimony that has been provided at this meeting as a description of what you're proposing.
Yes.
Right, but there are many details that
Yeah.
were significant to your deliberations or the prior board's deliberations that were not fleshed out tonight. But
Yes.
as David said, maybe you talk about that at the end of the meeting or now. Give the applicant some direction.
Yeah, and the question is what other information of that, and as Alex was pretty much alluding to, basically, if it's not part of this if it's not submitted, if it's not part of the testimony, then the board shouldn't be considering it. It's what's being submitted here in this particular application, since it is a new site plan application.
We talked about making assumptions about what was presented the last time and what's being presented this time, and that I think as a board, we need to be careful that basically everything be represented. We've got new people on the board that didn't hear things the first time, and they shouldn't be relying on 3 people that were here, scratching their head and trying to remember what was said the last time. So I think the way we're looking at it is this is a new application and should include everything. So in a general sense, I would say don't assume anything that you presented the last time is going to be included in what we're talking about unless you've provided it again. You don't necessarily have to present it, I guess, but it needs to be provided and included in our packages, just to make sure everybody's up to the same speed.
We'll handle this in whatever manner you request, at least consider that as we think about what else we want to provide. That said, I think in the original application, if you look at the cover letter, I did refer to that earlier material and said to the extent that you want additional information, you should feel free to look in those files and pull that information out. So from my perspective, we've already opened the door and said, all that information's available. But if you want us to specifically cite things, give us a list. We will certainly consider that.
David, we had a nice little example recently where we pulled something out, the leaf off pictures, not realizing that was something that was no longer valid. It's hard for us to try to figure out exactly what is valid and what is not. So we really need to put that decision on you as to what is, and if we have it beforehand, great, we can pull it out, that specific one, but we really need you to figure out that for us, because we're looking at it like, okay, what seems to be, but you know what it is that you want to have.
So question back to the farmer's market. Can you refresh my memory as to what was the proposal for schedule? Was it, I don't remember, was it like a 1 day a week for 3 hours? I can't remember.
Honestly, I don't remember either. Off the top of my head. For me too, this has gotten rusty, so some of the things I have updated myself on and re-reviewed, that's not a detail I've re-reviewed.
Okay, and I assume that was all part of the easement language, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And my recollection is that we spent time talking with the folks who at the time organized the farmers market and asked them, what works for you, and basically wrote the easement around that. Okay. In terms of process, that's something I do remember because I did a lot of that work personally. As to what came out of that specifically, I do not recall.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Off the top of my head.
Be great if we can get that information.
Yeah. It's on the list.
Okay.
Actually, maybe what I should say is it'd be great if we had an updated summary of that, where you ended up with it, where you felt comfortable ending up
Isn't
on
it in
it.
the decision?
Any questions on any of those?
I would have thought we would have described how
There's quite a lot of information about this issue in the DRB decision from 2012, which is in your packets and available for everyone publicly. So while you're thinking about, not tonight, but as we go forward, while you're thinking about what else you want to see in order to render a decision on this, I encourage you to reread that 2012 decision and look for some of those items.
Board members have any other questions on any of the other?
I hear a deafening silence, Dennis.
Moving forward, so I'm conflicted because I have all the recollections, you know, to talk about trafficking circulation. I thought that was addressed fairly thoroughly last time, but, you know, like, there are people that weren't here last time, and I don't know if they would have any other opinions about it if it was gone over in detail again.
On the traffic?
Circulation, layout, you know, how you get in and out, how tractor trailers back up to the back loading dock, you know, lots of details, you know, that some of us bring knowledge of and have reached conclusions that, you know, are adequate, but new members don't have.
And Ted, are you thinking right now principally of site plan standard number 2, which is, yeah.
Yeah.
So could you go over how all the circulation works?
Sure. So again, up here we have Commerce Street. This is the existing driveway for the Bank of Middlebury, and it comes down and, you know, circulates into the bank. We're proposing to simply extend that. For vehicles, this is the main parking field. You might think of it as the east parking field. And so they'll be able to come in and, you know, choose their, you know, 3 aisles here, and they can choose, you know, where to park. There's also the northern parking field that has some spaces right along the building as well as in the center here. Truck deliveries will come in. They will turn this way and then back into the loading dock, which is here at this northwest corner. And then we have dumpsters and so forth here. So the deliveries are back here, and this has been designed, and, you know, all the turning radii work for trucks to be able to make those maneuvers to do what needs to be done back in this service area. And we put the service area at this corner of the building to, you know, move it as far away from Mechanicsville Road and the residences and so forth as could be done, and then have, you know, quite a bit of screening around this whole area.
And were you going to have certain times for the deliveries?
There are some limits, and again, I apologize, I don't remember exactly what they are at this point, but there were some limits on the deliveries, yes.
Okay.
If you look at the information that Roger Dickinson provided that we discussed at the last meeting, the parameters limiting the delivery hours, I believe, are in those traffic memos. So it does restrict deliveries or prohibit deliveries during those peak traffic times, the AM and the PM peak. So there won't be trucks trying to get in and out of the site when traffic is at its worst.
That was just for large tractor trailer, right? And I thought smaller trucks could
that's
come
my
in, but only
understanding.
through Mechanicsville.
Yeah, what I don't recall without looking is if it's all deliveries or if it's just the larger tractor
Okay.
trailers. It's certainly the larger tractor trailers during those times. I don't know about the smaller, you know, coffee cup, cruller, box, you know, van delivery, and whether that's part of those limitations.
I am anticipating that we will come back and have another meeting about traffic, so if you want to, we can have more details on that at that time.
David, can you just flesh that out? I don't think Mitch and I were aware that you were planning to submit additional materials on that. So what exactly are you going to be gracing us with?
Our understanding from the last meeting was that there were a number of questions around traffic. John Slason in particular had some questions around traffic, and that we were asked to look at not only 2019, but go out 5 years. I mean, there's a whole series of things that came directly out of that hearing.
So your intention is to address those?
Yes.
Okay.
That we had understood that that's what you wanted from us, and so
It is clear.
we're planning to respond to that.
Thank you. I was unfortunately misread your memo of May 29th, in which
Okay.
you said this memo doesn't address those issues, so I thought, okay, well, I guess they won't be addressed.
No. I was saying it's just not in that memo.
Okay.
We are addressing them, but just not, don't look for those answers in that particular memo.
And that's what Scott was saying, you're shooting to have that ready to present at the July 3rd meeting?
Yes.
Assuming that everything comes together?
Yes. Our hope is to get it together much sooner, and I heard Attorney Dumont's concerns about getting it earlier, and our hope is to have it much earlier to circulate for people to look at and be able to comment on and have whatever discussions.
Okay.
Yep. I don't have a precise date for when it'll be ready. We're working on it, but we're working on it.
All right, if that's it for vehicular, do you want to make a statement about pedestrian circulation? Might as well just go through all these.
Sure, I can talk about pedestrian circulation. So if you look at, there's several things. First of all, if you look at Commerce Street, there are sidewalks on Commerce Street. There's a missing piece here along lot, I think it's lot 12, if I recall correctly. We will be infilling that. We are also extending the existing sidewalk that goes along the eastern side by the Bank of Middlebury, and we'll extend that into the site. Similarly, coming along on the existing sidewalk that's in the easements that the Giro's granted to the town for this sidewalk, we will be providing connections in here. So you'll be able to walk, whether you're coming from the north or coming from the south, be able to, easily access as a pedestrian into the front of the building.
All right, I'm kind of going to go quickly through number 2 here. Parking, I know that if you do the math for, from section 5.5, you've got a need of 90 parking spaces. I think you've got 120 or something like that. Even with the snow storage that you're taking out on the east side, it kind of fits. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes, I think it's 128 parking spaces, ignoring for a moment the ones that might be covered from time to time during winter from snow storage. And we think that that's about the right number in terms of Hannaford's experience with its stores elsewhere. And it has quite a few stores and quite a bit of experience. So in terms of what's really required to serve this.
Then not to duplicate with the other things, I guess, snow removal, emergency access on. Do you want to discuss those two? Snow removal?
For snow removal, it will be, there are a number of designated areas, and I'm sorry, I know that part of it's over here, and I think there's a section right here that's off the pavement. This is on the pavement. There may be a third one I've forgotten.
I think you decided not to use that third one.
Well, there was this
That
area
one there, right.
that you had pointed out, one of the permit conditions in the prior approval was that we would not be allowed to do snow storage there, and we're happy to have that continue to be a permit condition, that we don't use that. If there reaches a point where the snow being stored is starting to block more parking spaces than are actually needed functionally, then we'll truck it off-site.
All right. I think you've discussed landscaping, screening. Let's see, setbacks, I think we talked about prior. Hours of operation?
Again, it's not a detail that I focused on because it wasn't something to ask questions about. We did have, as I recall, we did ask and were granted a conditional use approval to have staff in the facility somewhat beyond the hours that would normally be required. And it was granted and was not appealed, and I believe that that is still valid. I do not off the top of my
Yes.
head remember what those hours are. Again, I only focused on the things about which you asked questions, so I don't have all of the details fresh in my mind.
Actually, that's fine, and I know what you mean. Let's see, and I hope this is helpful here, just going through the different ones here. Exterior building design, and achieving maximum compatibility with adjacent properties and with the character of the neighborhood. That certainly was one of the topics of conversation the last go-around that was quite extensive.
And we believe we've achieved that. The building clearly is within the size that's allowed within the zoning and is much smaller than at least 2 buildings in the area, both the old cheese factory and, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the...
NRG.
NRG, thank you. The wind energy folks just north of the site, they're within, a property or 2 of ours, and they're considerably larger than what we have. So I don't think square footage is or should be an issue in terms of height. We are well within what's allowed within the zoning. It allows up to 35 feet. We're proposing 27 feet. And as I think I said in my memo, the grades here are below Mechanicsville Road by quite a bit. They're even below the sidewalk elevation in terms of what we're proposing. And it's very similar to the post office and the bank and so forth, and the fill that's been done by other users in this area. So we think that, and having hired a local architectural firm to design it specifically for this site, we think that it's quite compatible. And this is not one of those areas that has a distinctive singular type of style, which some historic districts or other districts do. This is incredibly diverse in terms of the architectural style, and we believe that ours not only fits in, but is considerably more attractive, we would like to believe, than at least some of the other structures in the immediate vicinity.
All right, I'm going to kind of go flying through the next group. Lighting, you have a lighting plan, and downcasted lighting, and I think people can look at that, and I don't think it's been an issue that's been discussed. You're on municipal, you're going to be on, you're proposed to be on municipal water and sewer. That's item number 5. We've talked extensively about stormwater grading and drainage. Erosion control, you happen to have provided in this an erosion control plan. You have a state erosion control permit, which is pretty extensive. Let's see, consistency with the town plan regards to pattern of development, preservation of significant natural and cultural resources, location and nature of existing and planned roadways and other public facilities. I think you've addressed much of that, unless you'd like to add something to that.
I don't think we have anything at the moment to add. We're happy to answer specific questions if people have them.
I would like to understand, again, and especially for the members who haven't seen this before, the elevation differences and what the retaining wall will look like in height, and both by the Dark Star property and by Giroux's, because I think that 0.3 acre lot that you, or a piece of land that you bought from them is going to be significantly raised from the back of Giroux's, right?
Yes.
And it's like 7 feet?
No, I don't think it's that much. If you go to my memo of May 29th.
Right, that's what I'm looking at.
And my response number 3, what you're going to, there's specific details there. So this site slopes from the eastern corner here, kind of the southeastern corner, to this northwestern corner. This is the highest elevation, this is the lowest elevation on the site as it exists today. And here, presently, this is a grade of about, let's see, 346 above sea level. This is about 337. So there's about a 9-foot drop over the course of, that grade, more or less. We're proposing to bring the entire site up to, depending on exactly where you are on the site, roughly in the area of about 344, 345. So, this will continue to be the high point at about 346. And so at this area, we're bringing it up from about 337 to, 344, something like that in that area. And I'd have to look at the grading plans to get you the precise number, but that information is on the grading plans.
So that's 7 feet, right?
Yes, I think.
When I count the contours on that little area there, it looks like there's 5 1-foot contours.
Yeah, I think, now that I think about it, I think that this area is actually lower, and I'm sorry, I don't have that. Do you have the engineering plan? Can you pull that up? because that will have it. And I believe, I've looked at that, and I think that this is only about 5 or 6 feet here, because I think the high point's more in this area, that this is not quite that high.
As I remember the high point, using the hand here, that this area over here was the higher area of the...
Yeah, this is
site.
high over here.
And then
Yep.
it comes down. It's sort of an even, a continuous slope that just
Do you have the
comes down.
engineering plan, Mitch?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could pull that up, we can certainly look at the grades. Try, I think you're going to want C2 or C3, if I recall correctly. There we go.
Because what you have over here is, let's see, you have a 345 contour on this side, and I'm looking at the proposed contours here, where it comes down to this end of the site, where you have 342. The existing grades, you have here 337, 336 down over here, coming up to, let's see, I'm looking for that exact contour. It matches at some point over here, because I remember looking at the stormwater, where the stormwater system over here was digging quite a bit into the existing ground, where it was pretty much on grade on the other side of the site.
But Ted, your question was about the retaining wall in particular.
Yeah.
Mitch, if you want to scroll to the north side of the building, a little bit further to the west, keep going, right in there.
Yep.
So
Okay.
there's a grade change happening in that where it's labeled snow storage area. And David, can you indicate where the retaining wall is in relation to all that?
Yeah, so there are 2 retaining walls. There's one here, right around where the driveway enters the parking, and then one here at this northwest corner near where the trucks will come in and back up. And the existing grade in this area is about 337, and the proposed grade, if I think I'm reading that correctly, is 342.
Correct.
So it's about a 5-foot.
And I think just to the left of that left retaining wall, there's a notation that says the retaining wall, top wall is 341, bottom of the wall is 337.
Thank you.
And then
So
it looks
that's
like
about-
there's another retaining wall kind of behind the building, on the back side of the building, that also looks like a 5 feet, 343 to 338 to 343.
West side, that we're looking.
West side, yeah.
So, and
Oh.
you
There you
also asked about this area, and here we're not proposing a retaining wall. This will be a slope, and it'll be heavily, planted, if you look at the landscaping plan. So the retaining wall is just this section right here,
I see.
but this is a planted slope.
So to the east of that retaining wall that we're looking at right there, it's a landscape slope? Is that what I'm gathering?
Yes, that's correct. Yep. So between this retaining wall and the other one that's by
Move east a little
the
bit.
entrance, that will be, this will be landscaped, and you can look again at the landscape plan for that area.
So what's going to happen to the center of town during the construction phase?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, there's going to be, is there fill being brought in?
Yes, there will be fill brought in.
And lots of construction materials, and how's that all going to happen right in the center of our town with traffic as bad as it already is?
There will be certainly trucks bringing in materials. That's the nature of doing construction. As to the quantities, they're going to be relatively small compared to the traffic volumes that exist. I do not know off the top of my head specific numbers. I'm not sure we've gotten to that level of specificity in terms of the logistical planning of construction. That typically happens once you hire your general contractor, which certainly given the delays in this, we've not yet done.
Would there be an expectation of attempting to avoid the peak traffic times when you're trying to deliver soil and construction materials?
I think in general, that would be in everybody's interest.
Yeah, okay.
I had a couple questions. One about pedestrian easement in the parking lot. Are there pedestrian crosswalks across to the front of the building that just aren't shown?
They do exist. You'll see that as you come in the sidewalk here,
I just see one,
there's
right.
one there, because that is the pedestrian route. And then Mitch, if you could show the, here we're actually proposing an extension of the sidewalks directly onto it.
It doesn't seem like there's any way to get safely from the actual parking lot, though, into the building through
Well,
crosswalks.
I've been involved in a lot of retail developments over the years, and my experience is that the vast majority of people, not everybody, but the vast majority of people take the straightest line they can.
I always take the crosswalk and
Do you?
the parking
Well,
lots. I do.
you
And I have my children do that, too.
fantastic for
Yes.
you. I would say you're the exception.
No. So
But, people will tend to take their carts, and they're going to wheel them, on this straight route up to wherever their parking space is,
Well,
and they'll
that's
come
why
over and up.
I was interested why there weren't any there where the people would take the direct route into the building.
So you mean a crosswalk
Right,
across
just a
that
hash.
front access point? You're not talking about a sidewalk through the parking lot?
No.
But
Just
something to
pedestrian
indicate to drivers
safety.
that they are likely to encounter pedestrians
Right.
at that location?
Our, again, for whatever it's worth, my experience is that as people enter, they're very aware that they're coming into a parking lot, and that people are, starting to search for parking spaces. They're looking for where they're going to turn.
And I find that crosswalks across where the majority of people will be crossing do tend to make people a little bit more aware that there might be someone walking across.
Okay?
Just one thought. And then the next question I had was, you mentioned needing more parking spaces because you have experience with how many you need for a store this size and a store in this location. Have those numbers been used with the trips for traffic, or did you use, I can't remember traffic. Did they use like a generated, or is it specific to Hannaford number?
Actually, David, go ahead.
I can't remember.
The traffic generation numbers come directly from the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual. And again, we'll talk about that more, I presume, at the next,
Sure.
where we talk about traffic.
I just was really interested in your experience and that you seem to have this wealth of knowledge. And I was like, oh, wow, you could use those exact numbers that you need to use your exact number of parking spots, and maybe instead of using a generic Vermont Department of Trips, that you could use your actual on-the-ground data for our traffic.
I don't want to mislead you here. The quantity of parking spaces is, I can't say there's an exact number, but rather, in general, based on the experience that Hannaford has with its stores, it knows in general, the quantity of parking spaces that will serve it well. It's not in their interest to build more than they need.
No, but I'm just...
More or less.
Right, but Hannaford, extrapolating that, Hannaford must know how many people they're assuming that are going to be using the store. So I was wondering if you're going to use that, if that number was used for the traffic study.
Different analyses professionally require different methodologies. And so when you're looking at traffic, the accepted methodology is to use the Institute for Transportation Engineers. And there are alternative methodologies that are available, but again, we should talk about that in the traffic. I'm
Okay.
not a traffic engineer personally.
Okay.
So I think
No,
we should.
I didn't know. The way that you said that, I was like excited that maybe you were using real data versus some that may not be specific to Hannaford, and your knowledge of what Hannaford stores usually have, and your capacity and your traffic of people traffic, not car
Yeah.
traffic. Okay, that was my question.
Understood.
David, actually, can I just follow up on something that Sarah mentioned? Over here, is this over here and these over here on the plan, are those handicap access?
There will be handicap access ramps, yes, and not only that, you need to be able to get the shopping carts, so they
Right.
kind of serve a dual purpose.
Right. So basically, this would be an access where someone will come off with their shopping carts in this area and in this particular area over here, based on what looks to me like a thing for either handicap access or, I'm looking at this particular symbol. Am I reading it correctly, or?
Off the top of my head, again, it's a detail I've not looked at recently for exactly where those were placed, so I would need to look at the plans
Right.
more closely.
It may be just something,
They
as far as
should
Sarah's
show
comment.
very clearly on the civil engineering plan. That's the plan I would rely on, and they should be
Take a look
there.
at that and think about the crosswalk comment that, a little extra paint, that
Yep,
might be a
understood.
good thing.
All right, well, it's 8:45, so I'd like to open it up to the public. I'd like to cap it off at 9:15, because we want to discuss what else we would like to have.
We brought Mr. Stout here to respond to the latest information that was.
Your name, please?
Jim Dumont, and we have Mr. Stout here to respond to the information that had been filed last week.
Perhaps, Dennis, we could, like last time, have Jim's expert witness come up and speak and then go from there.
Okay.
This is on what subject?
Pardon?
This is on what subject?
Hold on, Ted, let him introduce himself, and then we'll be in front of the mics, and it'll be easier for everyone to hear.
My name is Tony Stout. I'm a senior planner at Lakeside Environmental Group in Burlington. I do much of what David does, probably on a smaller scale. I was going to talk about a number of the site plan issues, as in 3 specific things, and then I also have one follow-up item on the subdivision related to a detail on the subdivision plat. And I can go through this stuff fairly quickly. And I have paper copies of my outline of my testimony. This was, I believe,
Actually, this is available on the Dropbox, the letter that you sent. And they can use this on their iPads if they want.
So I can start, I will skip Stout 5. I'll come back to that. Let's just jump into the site plan issues. On outline Stout 6, in terms of the canal walkway as a gathering place, the zoning talks about protecting those gathering places and having the project be oriented around them, things of that sort, and you can look at that zoning language. The canal walk comes in across that historic truss bridge that was pointed to before, and then is within that 75-foot building setback area from the north edge of the canal that we have talked about in the past, and that is subject of the subdivision regulations. Similar to what was mentioned earlier, the canal walk, when I scaled it off, averages between 10 and 15 feet off the edge of the canal over its length. It varies. And when you look at the aerial photos, you'll see the currently mowed landscaped area is 30 to 40 feet extends 30 to 40 feet from the north edge of the water in the canal, to give you a sense of the scale what that space uses relative to that 75-foot building setback that is in the current subdivision plat. They gave you, as I mentioned before, the last time I testified, just to recap, that I found all of the buildings within Commerce Park meet the 75-foot setback from the canal or the streams. There's parking closer, but all the buildings meet that setback.
If I can add a little correction on that. Did you check the Nestec building? Because a portion, it seems from our mapping, a portion of the Nestec building is within 75 feet of the canal.
There's two different things you have to look at. And I can't go back to way back when they first approved the Commerce Park subdivision. It appears that the setback line is within 75 feet of the canal on that building. But it also appears that whoever drew the plan at that time thought that was the 75-foot distance. So there was a discrepancy between the line and the water interpretation at that time. The same thing on the stream. There are some meanders on the stream that weren't picked up by whoever did that plan at that time.
Well, actually, I wasn't even,
So,
I know there's actually an issue also with Patrick Brook that's up there, but I was just simply looking at the
Can
canal.
you just continue, Rich? Sure. Yeah, thank you.
and then when we're talking about this compatibility with the canal walk and the neighborhood and things like that, you are going through site plan review again. Your current zoning requires a comprehensive master plan review before you do site plan review. It should be part of this. Master planning usually looks at all these broad issues of where do you put the building? How do you make it compatible? Usually, with big boxes, not with a lot of detail like this. That has not happened with this review process. And so I would encourage you to keep that in your mind, that just because it happened to be this way on a previous review does not mean that that makes it compatible with your current standards. And that the same standards that you are putting other large developments in the Northwest Village District, for example, through their master planning process. Yes, master planning is harder to do when you have a smaller piece, but you've got Lot 15 that was owned by the Giros. You've got 2 or 3 other Giro parcels right next to it that they own and control. There is some master planning that could happen here that would then get into the issues of, is that the best place for the farmer's market? Would the farmer's market be better over by the canal walk? Would it be better to relocate that building into another orientation and have the parking they're talking about for the farmer's market be on the side toward the canal with more landscaping to enhance the canal and enhance that combination of uses rather than having the farmer's market be an add-on jammed in at the back by the loading dock. So things like that, to me, that's what master planning should be doing, and I think that's what your current zoning was looking for. And I see no reason why you can't go back and do that. And then finally on the canal, as you come across the truss bridge, I believe that's the rendering on page 5 of 20 of those renderings. You get a sense of what that 160-foot long by 27-foot high facade's going to look like. This one.
That one? Or the one before?
This one, 5 of 20. Gives you a sense of that big wall that you're facing. It's difficult to get the depth perception in a photo. So you need to go stand there, use some of the trees and other landmarks in that picture to try to get a sense of what that's like. I believe you are going to find that that big wall, in reality when you stand there, feels like it's much closer to you. So I would encourage you to think very carefully about that. And then the next rendering, 6 of 20, which is at the Pocket Park, gives you even more a sense of the proximity of that building wall to you. And then 15 of 20 gives you a pretty good sense of what the parking lot proximity is like in terms of there's a vehicle in the corner of that parking lot. I think it's a minivan. 15. This one, yeah. And I think that you may be able to pan on that. Anyway, you get a sense of the size of that vehicle close in terms of its proximity to the canal walk, which is, it's in essence, I believe, where this picture was taken, down near the post office. So those were 2 images that I thought gave you a realistic sense of size and scale. My final comment on the renderings was, none of these renderings show you what the building looks like from at where the sidewalks leave the canal and go into the store. They show you pictures from Wheelerville, from the road, Mechanicsville Road. They show you pictures looking obliquely down the canal walk, so you see lots of trees and landscaping. They give you views at points where there's landscaping, such as this one, up at the Pocket Park, but they have given you no images where the sidewalk comes right into that southeast corner of the building. And that may have a, affect how you view that. So I'm going to jump on to Stout 7, planned public facilities. So this is the official map piece. My understanding is that considerable public funds were spent on that canal walk. Oh, hold on a sec.
Yeah, that's where you are.
Yes. And that the official map does identify that Lot 15, to my mind, quite clearly, in terms of the lines. The line is defined by a change in color, not necessarily a solid black line. But it was very clear to me when I looked at the plan that Lot 15 was part of official map, which makes me immediate, as a planner, go, what's the planned use? And the official map lists those off. That would trigger me to go into the town office and have a visit and figure out what it is that I need to be planning around, or providing the town an opportunity to purchase this site and go find another site, one or the other, or some negotiated settlement in between. And all I would say is that if you're going to be doing that and you're only going to be dedicating a portion of the site to public use so that the town doesn't have to purchase it, which is the other option, and you're thinking about things like the canal walk and the farmer's market, where the parking for the farmer's market is, now's the time to be thinking, again, along with a master plan, where these things go. Where do they best serve the public? And if the public has to expend some additional funds to make it work perfectly, that's something that can be negotiated. But there's no reason you need to accept this project the way it's designed now, because it's been that way since 2012. It's a new review. With regard to the site plan requirement, with regard to the town plan, a very simple thing I would point out to you, under goal 3.1 of the town plan, it talks about guiding development so the village growth area serves Hinesburg's primary growth center for a wide array of uses. Under that goal, action 3.1.1, consider a larger size cap for grocery stores in the village and village northwest zoning districts rather than the existing 20,000 square foot limit applied to all retail stores in these districts. I recognize that that's talking about two different districts within the village growth area, not the commercial zone. But there's nothing in this section of the town plan where they're talking about the goals that talks about Commerce Park and the commercial district being where you want large grocery stores. They're talking about the two other districts. And then finally, going back to the subdivision, this is a technical detail that I felt compelled to point out. On the applicant's, what brought us back to redoing site plan was that the building was within the 75-foot building setback to the canal. And I believe that was based on testimony that I provided at environmental court. And that testimony was that the 75 feet for that line was from the north edge of the canal, not from the southern property line. The plat that they have provided you with this, with the new subdivision application, and I had the reference number, it's that Hannaford 9066 PL revised. You can bring it up when you, if and when you want. I can hold it up here.
It was just prepared last week, it circulated last week.
But it has this blue dashed dot line that they call the existing setback. And the note here for that line makes it clear that that line is 75 feet from the southern property line, not from the north edge of the canal. It's only the existing line, interpretation of the existing line, but I caution, if at the end of this process you decide not to honor their request for the 25-foot setback, and you say, no, we'd prefer the 75-foot setback as on your new subdivision plat, you will not be reflecting the existing 75-foot building setback on the existing subdivision plat that's in the land records now. There's an 8 to 10-foot difference, the width of the canal. If you take that setback, add the measured distance here, add that 8 to 10 feet, magically the front corner of the building is right at the 75-foot setback line. So it makes a difference. So I only point that out technically so we don't end up later on with a, you think you're doing one thing with this and end up actually doing something different. So it's, again, it's a technical point. And that is it.
All right.
Questions?
Thank you.
If I could, for a moment. So this is Ginger Mott. Just an answer to Member Murphy's question about using Hannaford's data rather than ITE, generalized nationwide data. That's something that Mr. Ullman and Mr. Bruno have been advocating since the first round of hearings here. In their professional experience, that is the right data that should be used. So it was a great question. Thank you.
All right. Who's next?
Peter Earp. I don't know exactly the ramifications of the town accepting the donation of the land next to Canal and the Pocket Park. But I would encourage the DRB to think very carefully about the ramifications of taking any responsibility for any of the landscaping or any issues that may happen in terms of piping or erosion or anything there. I think it'd be much cleaner to just make Hannaford remain responsible for that whole area. The town gains nothing by having an easement across there. And I think also that if you do an approval, it should be very clear that all vegetation shall be the responsibility of Hannaford, because they've included it in their screening plans, et cetera. And the town doesn't want to do that. I may be wrong about this, but rather than waste time. And the other thing, I think that when Tony was talking about master planning, et cetera, it would be really wonderful to be able to think about a pedestrian access through the northwest corner where the farmers market is proposed, depending on the kind of development that eventually happens on the Giro properties. It would really help traffic in Hinesburg if people could park in one lot and walk to other businesses. And that will never happen if you have to go all the way out and use a perimeter parking lot. So in terms of a decent master plan, it really should talk about connecting all those businesses internally, and you'd really have a much more vital area.
All right, next.
So could you put that, to put up the subdivision?
Tell us who you are.
Yes, I'm Jean Kadash, and I'm speaking on behalf of the 49 citizens who submitted petitions to the board. I wanted us to be reminded of what our subdivision and zoning regulations say, because I think they tell us whether this project should be approved.
Gene, is this what you want?
No, it's just the subdivision, 2 subdivision regulations and 2 zoning regulations.
Because since this mentioned the same ones, I thought this was replacing the other
No,
one.
but there's a page, a one-page that I submitted to you that has just two subdivision. Yeah, there you go.
That one.
That's it. Okay. Emphasis is mine in this in this slide. So first, looking at the two subdivision regulations, 6.10.6 says that outstanding natural features, including historic sites and similar irreplaceable assets, shall be preserved. Not may be preserved, but shall be preserved. I would argue that the Pony Trust Bridge and Canal Walk remind us of our industrial past, represent an investment of much time and money, are definitely irreplaceable assets, and as such should be preserved. We are also urged in this regulation to carefully define building locations and heights in order to protect the natural features. Regarding location, I think of the wetland and the services it provides, which would be all but totally destroyed by this project. The wetland currently sends clean water to Patrick Brook, even during a dry spell, and from there on to Lake Champlain. The wetland, too, is clearly an irreplaceable asset. The next one, 6.11.1, calls on us to promote and contribute to an appropriate street and pedestrian network sensitive to the historic patterns for the village area, which provides for connections between parcels, and to reinforce the existing village pattern of buildings lining public streets. In contrast, most customers would arrive at the proposed Hannaford store not as pedestrians, but by car. The store would be on a kind of island, not connected to other businesses or activities, and not on a street. It faces neither Commerce Street nor Mechanicsville Road. It faces its own parking lot. Then the zoning regulations, 4.3.43 mentions compatibility, maximum compatibility with adjacent properties and with the character of the neighborhood. We've talked about this a lot. We have a variety of businesses in Commerce Park. They're comparatively small. They face the street, are joined by a sidewalk, and mostly have parking to the side or back. Much like the subdivision regulations above, 4.3.47 speaks of the pattern of development we desire, preservation of natural and cultural resources, and harmony with other public facilities, none of which this project would provide. And I'd like to say a few things about the official map, which calls for community facility on Lot 15, a central location within our town. In no way is Hannaford's proposal for meeting this requirement with a Hannaford-owned and controlled, once a week, summer only, farmers market reasonable or adequate. Beyond the fact that no group is offering to organize a farmers market, what is proposed would be tiny, enclosed within slopes on two sides and a retaining wall on another. It would be difficult to access, would operate in isolation from the village network of sidewalks and green spaces, and would look out at the backs of other buildings. Farmers markets in other towns, for example in Shelburne, are on village greens, big enough so vendors can spread out, shady and cool on a hot summer day, a place for leisurely shopping and chatting with neighbors. Chatting with neighbors is what Dar Williams, the keynote speaker for this Friday's downtown conference in Bristol, has in mind when she uses the term positive proximity in her book, What I Learned in 1,000 Towns. She says positive proximity means a diverse range of equal voices. I think we have that going on in Hinesburg. At the 4th of July, whichever day we celebrate it, in the discussions of our boards and commissions, at our fun local restaurants, and at the new sports field, in the aisles at Lampman's, I don't think the proposed project would make us feel we were in Hinesburg and nowhere else. We should deny the application.
Thank you. We have another 5 minutes, so who's next?
I'm Catherine Goldsmith. Excuse me. I brought my model, which some of you might remember. I made this model in HO scale, which is a model railroad scale. It's 3.5 millimeters to a foot. And I did it in that scale because of the availability of little people and cars, because our zoning talks a lot about human scale, and I wanted people to really get some sense of how big the building was in relation to people. and the sidewalks around and the other buildings around. So I can bring it again. I apologize, it's gotten a little beat up. And just to point out, this is the little house that's alongside the bridge. So that's on there too. So I invite anyone who wants to take a look at it. And one other thing, I would urge the board to request a copy of the Army Corps permit for fill, which mentions 206 truckloads per day for 15 days. And I understand that actually might be one way, so those trucks might be becoming filled 206 times a day and then returning empty. Thank you.
My name is Mary Crane. I'm sort of fascinated by the talk that this is a master plan and that they're coming back to us, and that because we're supposed to consider this as a new plan. I mean, it's amazing to me, if that were the case, we could redo this whole thing. Like, you could come and ask Hannaford to really figure out how we want our town to have a store there. It could be a great opportunity. I doubt Hannaford would want to do that. But, I mean, you could sit there and go, oh, where would be a perfect farmer's market? How would we like to have this space developed? I mean, this store is not a store for Hinesburg. It's a store for all towns south of us. And we have to live with the traffic, we have to live with this space, but it's not really for us. That's all I gotta say.
Anybody else?
All right, Dennis, I'm just going to mention that I received a letter, actually.
We have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't see that. Do have some letters that I want to just mention.
Carl Bowling, I guess I have a question. You're going to be debating what you asked Hannaford to provide, and us and the public need to know what we're responding to. So I urge you to make sure that the Dropbox has whatever is current, valid, and what we should react to. Or do we assume that something that we got 6 years ago is actually what we should comment on in terms of providing you our thoughts? I've been waiting for everything to sort of be there that might be different, or confirmation that whatever it was before is remaining accurate, and that's exactly the position of Hannaford's. So I hope it was talked about that you will have Hannaford's provide, even if it's a repeat submittal, but it's all in one place so the public and anyone else can see what actually is going to be your basis for making a decision, and we can provide input on something we know 100% is the accurate, up-to-date information.
That's our goal, too.
One more.
Meg Handler. I'm actually one of the submissions of a letter which I would like to withdraw, actually, because similarly, I'm really confused by the whole process of how this has been unfolding. I was under the impression that today might be the last day for this process to continue, and I think there's new information that's been raised tonight. I think it's really confusing, the relationship between the previous permit application and the current permit application. I also thought that this was going to be a new, or handled as a new proposal, and all of a sudden we have references to what was submitted 7 years ago. I think it is incredibly sloppy, and I think if this permit were granted, it would be pretty unclear what the relationship to the previous permit was, and what's included and what isn't included. And certainly as a member of the public, I would like to be able to comment on what's happening, but I'm frankly really confused by the process and by what is considered relevant and when is it appropriate to make comments on which topics. It's a very confusing process, and I'd like to see some sort of clarification on that.
Thank you. Mitch, you had?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, well, first I'll just answer part of that is that everything that should be considered is on the Dropbox right now, and we're trying to clarify with the applicant additional materials that they want to be placed onto it, and as soon as it's clear to us, it will be on the Dropbox. And that's been something that we've been trying to keep up as best as we can. What I'm going to mention right now is a few additional letters, just to mention that were received within the last couple of days that are in the Dropbox as it is right now. We did receive another letter from Peter Erb regarding stormwater, mostly. We have, I put one, and then I thought, at my mistake, that there was two that was submitted by Jean Kadesh. I thought one was replacing another. I will put the other one back up on the Dropbox on a number of issues that she mentioned. We have a letter here from Robert, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this, Thiefels, on various... Thiefels? Okay, thank you. On various topics as well. And just so you know, those are available in the packets and available in the Dropbox.
We saw those.
All right, great.
Just a clarification, those are not the staff report that was provided tonight, is that?
Pardon?
Those additional letters are not in the staff materials?
That is correct. We, obviously anything that comes in either, the day of, it takes us a while to actually put a staff report together. Those would not be reflected in a staff report, and obviously these new submittals are clearly not as well. They'll probably, I'll say in supplemental report number 3, they probably will be listed.
If I could just for 1 minute. The board has had so much information dumped on it. I'm sure it's quite a task you have in front of you, but if you're considering what information you would like, I would just ask you to refer to the letter I submitted May 10th, where I suggested instead of getting renderings that are fairly subjective from the applicant, you ask for cross-sections with data. And it's in my May 10th letter where I suggested 3 cross-sections that would be really helpful and particularly would have answered some of Mr. Lyman's questions, Mr. Slason's questions, excuse me, from questions he raised last time. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I have a general instruction. I think we need instruction from Hannaford on what to bring forward from the prior application materials. I understand you're working on updated traffic. I have a request because of the specificity that we have to put on what might be required if future traffic studies show that the impact is greater than predicted. I would suggest that with that updated traffic, with recommendations for predetermined specific actions that could be required if post-construction traffic studies find that traffic impacts are greater than predicted. We have to identify those now, evidently, and we would look for the applicant's recommendations for what those might be. And I'd also like to see stormwater design analysis with respect to the current regulations. I think we didn't have a specific testimony on that. And the easement language for the farmer's market, if you want to bring that forward, if that's still your proposal, we would like that to be brought forward. And if there's any changes to it, I know that there was some issue with how restrictive it was back when it was proposed last time. Anything else?
Anything else anybody would like?
Can I just make a quick statement? As a citizen, I don't want to have to go and look back in any history to try to figure
No,
out
no,
what
I'm
to
not, we're
respond.
bringing, whatever is being brought forward.
Everything should be in that
will be in the new-
Dropbox.
Will be in the new
If
application.
these
Yeah.
guys want to take the responsibility,
Yep.
and I think you're nuts to, I think these guys should send it, but it should be a complete application, and it is not.
Yep, I agree.
So I guess to reiterate, when we were talking about our minutes, a question that I had about the traffic study, and I think it's been raised, is this apparent discrepancy between what's listed as, 1,000 feet of queuing, but the observation is you see traffic going all the way back over the hill. And so people look at that and they say, well, the model that's supposedly predicting the current situation apparently must be wrong because it's not showing traffic going back over the hill. So I would like some feedback from the traffic engineer again, which may come up in the next traffic meeting, about why doesn't the model seem to show this traffic? Is it a question of what's queued and what's rolling? How does that model actually predict or account for the fact that we actually see traffic, whether it's rolling or not, it's going back past NRG and up the hill. I don't know how far back over the hill, but I think there's a lot of concern and questions about the traffic study because what you see is not what we think or maybe what we understand the traffic study to be saying. So if some better clarification could be given there, it might help alleviate some concerns.
So, you know what we would like? And do you have time to do this by next meeting?
Well, it would be good if there's specific requests for information from other board members, now's the time to get it out there. I don't know if Sarah or John or Greg have anything in particular that you want to give guidance on.
I particularly wanted the stormwater stuff supplemented.
Okay. It would be good for you all to understand when you are continuing this hearing too.
Right.
Your next meeting is June 19th, and we just earlier talked about the following meeting being on July 3rd. It sounds like you're prepared to have this additional traffic information ready for the July 3rd meeting, but not for the June 19th meeting. Does it therefore make sense to continue this to July 3rd and skip the next meeting?
That's what I
Or
was
is-
thinking.
Hannaford to skip that. We have something else on the agenda.
Right, I'm not talking about canceling the
And
meeting.
a few
just-
other ones too.
Yeah, just talking about this application. Does that work for the board?
Yes.
Yeah.
Does that work for the applicant? Okay.
Hence the whole reason to thresh that out before. Okay.
All right, so I'll make a motion to continue this to
July 3rd.
July 3rd.
Second. Oh, 2 seconds.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you all for coming.
Is there a deadline on the Dropbox to be 100% accurate? It will only be accurate or complete when we receive material from the applicant, so we'll discuss that with them, but we haven't, the board didn't just set one, Carl, so I don't have one to give you.
I mean, if you guys could disperse quickly, that would be helpful.
Machine died. What else is on the agenda?
So Dennis, under other business, you don't have any decisions to deliberate on tonight. I think the only items were the ones that Mitch mentioned earlier.
And I'm just going to go through a couple of different little, this is other business.
Right, go for it, Mitch.
All right, just some other business.
Folks, come on, help us. You finish our meeting.
Sure. Okay. Other business, discussion about possibly changing start time to meetings. Would you be interested in having a 7 o'clock start time as opposed to a 7:30 start time?
I would not.
I think I prefer 7:30 as things stand, but I am
I
not
have
adamant
things
about it.
going on that would make 7 o'clock that much more difficult,
All
so.
right, just the thought
Dick, I
came
didn't
up.
hear a word you said, unfortunately.
Sorry. I have things that happen on
For us
Tuesday.
to get home by 7:30.
Yeah, between work and golf and whatever things that happen on Tuesday nights.
Although I would love to end a half hour earlier, I can't start a half hour earlier. That's me. I don't know about you guys. You're early.
7 is fine with me.
You're early.
It's gotta work for everyone.
I mean, I might be able, you can't do it for the summer. The summer's the worst time for you
Summer's the
probably.
worst time,
It's bad.
If we can't hear ourselves, we certainly VCAM can't.
So,
Yeah.
why don't we give it a, when we come back to the next meeting, just come up with a firm, see what we can do. I'm the one that suggested it. I would really like to start at 7. 9:30 is just late for me, but, so,
I mean, it's every other week.
And it seems like-
Could you rearrange your stuff?
lots of
every
times
other
I'm just
week to
sitting
get
around
here
waiting
earlier?
to go to the meeting. And I know you guys are doing the same too, a lot, so.
I'm ambivalent at this point.
Okay.
I
But it's
find
been,
things to do if we do
but it's been 7:30 for like 40 years.
Change?
You know.
Change is bad.
Okay.
If it's a 7:15 time to
7:50.
We're fine, we're fine, as staff, we're fine either which way.
Please don't make it 7:15. I will tell you honestly that probably every other meeting, somebody walks in at 7 thinking that that's when the meeting was. If you make it 7:15, people walk in at 7, 7:30, they, you know.
6:15.
One or the other. I will tell you that with Dennis's urging, the planning commission is talking about shifting it to 7 as well. If they do that, you will be the only board in this community that meets at 7:30. Everybody else meets at 7.
Well, it's heavy duty time.
But then again, if you want to meet at 7:30, you can meet at 7:30. That's fine.
It's totally your decision.
You know, we're happy to serve you either which way.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
It's tough for me to get back in town by then.
It
but
is, okay.
But that's just me, and I can figure it out.
Well, I think when we talked about this the last time, there were 1 or 2 members and our recording secretary at the time that said it was tough for them to start before 7:30, and so that's why it stayed 7:30.
But if everybody else is
And the new recording secretary.
getting to their twilight years and you can't stay up that late, you know, us young bucks, we could stay up a little later.
All right, we'll just talk about it
Yeah,
again
I
next
can
week.
be
And
flexible.
we could try it for 2 months or something,
Yeah.
just see how it works.
The summer is no problem for me, because sports are gone. So if we wanted to try it.
Well, what's your disposition, Mr. Chairman? Would you like to do it on a test trial basis through the summer, or do you want to table it have more discussion at the next meeting when John is here?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we do have, yeah.
Yeah, let's table it and we'll talk about it next time.
Okay.
And everybody can
I
see
didn't know
what,
this was an issue, so I hadn't thought
All
about
right,
it.
so just to be clear, the June
19th.
19th, thank you. The June 19th will start at 7:30, and you'll still continue to discuss this. We can make that an other business discussion
And
item.
what is on that agenda? Do you know?
We have Frost Beer Works that's going to come in for a quote-unquote restaurant. They want to have a food truck.
Yeah, yeah.
They did it as an experiment, and they kind of liked it and changed their hours. There is a site plan that we're going to schedule for lighting for, was it the United Church?
Yes, the United Church.
The church that's over here. And there may be one other particular thing, but those are the 2 things right now. I was tentative on, I didn't schedule yet that site plan because I didn't know what was happening here with the continuance of Hannaford's. Without it being there, I want to put that on there, and anything else that we could possibly squeeze in at that particular point in time that doesn't require warning. The food truck is a conditional use that had to be warned, so we had to set up a time for that.
Okay. What else do you have for other business, Mitch?
So sorry, back to time for a second, start time. Have you guys talked at all to any applicants? I mean, it seems like if you're dealing with like professional engineers or whatever, for the start time, the meeting start time.
The applicants have to do what you say. in
What's
that
that?
as far as time.
Sorry, I didn't,
Are you asking what the applicants think of a 7 o'clock start time?
yeah.
They're fine with that. Some of them show up at 7 thinking that they're supposed to be here then.
Yeah,
So,
okay. I didn't
yeah.
know if they had to drive distances or whatever, because they belong, to some engineering firm in
Part of their business
Montpelier.
plan.
Yeah, more often than not, people are confused about the 7:30 start time because in many other communities, 7 o'clock seems to be the sweet spot. And like I said, all of our other boards meet at 7 o'clock, so I don't think that's an issue for applicants.
Okay.
And they'll just have to deal with it, and again, you could be the only board that meets at 7:30 if you want, and that's fine.
Well, it makes us special.
You already are that, come on.
We are special.
What else you got, Mitch?
All right, I want to mention that, if you haven't heard, that new zoning and subdivision regulations have been warned, which, once they're warned, they're actually in effect until either there is no action after a year or they're put down. But usually what happens is they're warned, there's some comments perhaps, and then actually they've gone through ages, plenty of comments at this point, to the point there are, where the select board would then have an opportunity to vote on them and approve them. So just to let you know that that happens to be the case, and we're probably going to send you some new paper copies maybe at the next meeting.
I think what we'll actually do, because we don't want you to be overwhelmed, is we will alert you from now until these new regs are formally adopted, if anything to do with an application is going to be different under the proposed regs. In the meantime, we can point you to where the regs are located, and we can make them available, through Dropbox and the like.
I'll
The
set that up
select
on
board
Dropbox.
is having a public hearing on June 21st. Unless there's a hue and cry that I'm not privy to, I think they're probably going to hold a hearing and adopt them on that date, at which point we'll schedule a training, and I'll walk you through the new regs as they exist, having been adopted. But Mitch is absolutely right, and it's good to bring this up, that due to an interesting wrinkle in state statute, even though they haven't been adopted, because they've been warned for a hearing, you are supposed to be using them. No, it's been in state statute for a long time. It's just, it doesn't.
I don't understand a lot of things about the state, but that doesn't make any sense, because if the board then rejects them, now you've got a potential application.
Yeah, so the way it works is, my understanding is the legislative intent was to say if a community is in the process and taking affirmative action to modify their regs, we don't want development applications to sneak under the wire. And so they said the moment that it's warned for a select board final public hearing, that's a serious enough moment to say they will come into effect. You have to use them for a period of 150 days. If they're not adopted by then, you stop using them. If the select board doesn't adopt them, then any applications you deny under those new regulations, you have to rehear under the previous regulations, that continued.
Or even if we grant them under the more restrictive regulations, conceivably, the applicant could come back and submit a revised application.
They could, yeah, and that part's a little unclear. Interestingly, we had an applicant come for a zoning permit just this week or last week, who has been waiting for one of the changes that's happening through these housekeeping things. This is a change related to increasing the allowed size of accessory apartments. And she's been patiently coming to all the meetings and waiting, and I alerted her and said, the hearing's been warned, they're in effect, and she came in and got a zoning permit under the hopefully to be adopted regs. I don't think that zoning permit will be rescinded if the select board were for some reason to not take any action. It's an interesting legal question, but in any case, it's just good that you, like Mitch said, that you know that several sections of the regulations are going to be updated, and we will make sure you know on these
Nothing
upcoming.
that you're going to see in the near future is going to be affected. They're all under the old regulations as to when they've been submitted.
Well, with the exception perhaps of the church lighting plan, but we'll prep you for that. Don't worry.
I thought they got in there before. I'll mention that there's actually somebody else who actually came in on the other end who missed the deadline and probably would have benefited if they would have come in on that. But That's a whole other thing. And just to mention that there was another site plan amendment that you're going to hear about. It's incredibly innocuous. It's the seating for the Bristol Bakery. It really is more of, it was done through site plan amendment, but really was more, that was kind of the methodology to just kind of confirm that the seating plan is per the prior decision. So if anybody has any questions on that when you see it.
Specifically, an outdoor patio seating area that you're seeing under construction right now, that your previous approval authorized.
Yeah, I remember that.
But said they didn't have the details for it at the time, so it said, go through the zoning office for a minor site plan revision, and that's all that happened.
So just so you know, you're going to get if you haven't gotten the email yet, you're going to get an email, and that's what that's all about. And I would talk about the upcoming applications, but I think I've already done, so that's all I
Yeah,
have.
you guys are past your...
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.